Chapter 3. Davin had expected the search for a piloting job to be difficult, but he hadn't anticipated just how unforgiving Ironspire could be. In the first few days after Lyra had secured her position at Jarl's workshop, he spent most of his time combing through job boards, visiting mecha bays, and speaking to anyone who might have connections in the local piloting scene. But Ironspire wasn't a place that welcomed newcomers easily. The jobs were either non-existent or locked behind layers of bureaucracy. He was nobody here. No reputation, no connections. Just another hopeful face among the throngs of pilots looking to carve out a living. Even with his solid experience flying industrial mechas on Tessara Prime, Davin realized quickly that Ironspire's combat-oriented jobs were a different beast entirely. By the fourth day, Davin's optimism had faded. Lyra could tell he was getting worn down, but she didn't press him about it. She was too busy, elbows deep in another mecha repair job, and he didn't want to burden her with his frustration. "You're looking for a pilot? I've got experience running industrial rigs." The foreman of a dusty mech bay, a grizzled veteran with a cybernetic arm, barely looked up from his clipboard. "Industrial, huh? That's not what we need here. We're looking for someone with combat experience, arena fights, mercenary gigs, you know the drill." Davin shifted awkwardly, his heart sinking. "I could adapt. Mechas are mechas, right? I know how to pilot, handle tricky terrain, optimize performance." "Look, kid," the foreman sighed and finally met Davin's gaze. His expression was weary, the kind of look someone wore when they'd seen 100 hopefuls just like him come and go. "I don't have time to train someone fresh out of the sticks. Maybe find yourself a small-time crew, learn the ropes, come back when you've got some battle scars." "Right," Davin muttered, stepping back. "Thanks anyway." The foreman nodded and waved him off, already moving on to the next item on his list. Davin left the bay, his steps heavier with every rejection. The last few days had been a blur of similar encounters, repeated denials, dismissals, and polite but firm, "not what we're looking for" answers. He hadn't realized just how narrow the market was in Ironspire for a pilot without combat experience. The place was full of mercenary work, arena fights, and contracts that demanded skills he hadn't had the chance to hone on Tessara Prime. That's when it hit him. This wasn't Tessara Prime. The industrial work he'd done back home, hauling loads across rugged landscapes or operating mechas designed for mining and resource extraction, didn't count for much in Ironspire's high-stakes world of combat and speed. Davin stood in front of yet another mech bay, staring at the flashing job postings on a holographic display panel. Each one felt like a punch to the gut. The listings blurred together. Mercenary groups looking for seasoned pilots, arena teams needing seasoned veterans, long-haul transport gigs requiring combat readiness for escort duties. None of them were looking for someone like him. The noise of the bay swirled around him. Mechanics barking orders, engines whirring, the clanking of mecha limbs being repaired or modified. Somewhere in the distance, a voice over the intercom called for a final systems check on one of the larger rigs being prepared for an arena match. The atmosphere was chaotic, busy, and alien to Davin. For a moment he just sat there, feeling like a ghost in the crowd. He wasn't sure how long he stared at the job postings before a sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "You lost or something?" Davin blinked and turned to see a pilot, a tall, scarred woman wearing a patched-up flight suit and a permanent scowl, standing next to a mecha that looked just as worn as she did. She was adjusting a tool belt slung around her waist, her eyes narrowing at him like she was sizing him up. "Keep standing there, you're going to get run over," she said, jerking her thumb at a hulking mech being towed into the bay by a service drone. "This ain't a place for daydreaming." Davin tried to shake off the weight of his frustrations and gave a half-hearted smile. "Sorry. Just trying to find a piloting gig. It's been rough." The woman snorted. "No kidding. This place chews up rookies and spits them out. You looking for a fight, arena, or mercenary work?" "Something like that," Davin replied, scratching the back of his neck, "but I'm more used to industrial mechas, mining rig, haulers. I've got experience, just not the kind most people are looking for out here." "Industrial, huh?" The woman's scowl deepened as she wiped her hands on a rag. "This ain't the colonies, kid. You're in Ironspire now. Nobody here cares about moving rocks or hauling ore. They care about firepower, maneuverability, and if you can survive a firefight without getting blown to pieces." Davin's shoulders slumped. You could tell from her tone that this conversation was heading for another dead end. Yeah, I'm starting to get that. The woman glanced at him, her expression softening just slightly. Look, it's not personal. I've seen plenty of pilots come through here thinking they've got what it takes, but this place? It's a whole different beast. You want to make it. You need to prove you've got something worth betting on. And right now, she waved her hand at him dismissively. I don't see it. Davin felt the stings of her words. He knew she wasn't wrong, but hearing it out loud still hurt. He'd left Tessara Prime with dreams of becoming something more than a simple miner, of using his skills to build a life in Ironspire that meant something. But now, the gap between those dreams and the reality of a situation seemed wider than ever. He nodded and turned to leave, but the woman's voice stopped him. Look, she said, her tone more measured, if you're serious about making it here, find yourself a crew that's willing to take a chance on you. Get some experience under your belt. Prove you can handle a real fight. Then maybe you'll have something to offer. Davin gave her a weak smile. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. He walked away, feeling the weight of her advice. It wasn't the first time someone had told him to prove himself, but the truth was, he wasn't sure where to start. No one wanted to take a risk on an unknown pilot with no combat experience, and the longer he went without landing a gig, the more it felt like the city was closing in on him. Davin found himself back at the rusted wrench, slumped over a stool at the bar. The noise of the place didn't bother him this time. He stared into the bottom of his glass, replaying the events of the day in his head over and over. The rejections, the dismissive looks, the reminders that he didn't belong in this world. Can't keep doing this, he muttered under his breath. Lyra sat down beside him, her face smudged with grease from a long day in Jarl's shop. She had seen the look on his face when he'd walked in, and though she hadn't said anything at first, she knew her brother well enough to tell when something was eating away at him. You'll figure it out, she said, nudging his arm gently. It just takes time. Davin sighed. I'm starting to wonder if I even belong here. Lyra frowned. Don't talk like that. You've got more skill than half the pilots in this place. They just don't know it yet. Yeah, well, skill doesn't mean much when you can't get anyone to give you a shot. She didn't have a response for that. The truth was, Ironspire was a brutal place, and they both knew it. But Lyra wasn't about to let Davin give up, not after they'd come this far. Maybe you just need a break, she offered. Take a step back, regroup. We'll figure this out together. Davin gave her a half-smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, maybe. But even as he said the words, he felt the doubt creeping in. How long could they keep going like this? How long before the city ground them down like it had so many others? The rest of the night passed in a blur. The bar filled with more pilots, more mechanics, more noise. But to Davin it all felt distant. He sat at the bar, his mind lost in the whirlwind of uncertainty and frustration, wondering if there really was a place for him in Ironspire, or if he'd made a mistake coming here at all.